and welcome to Murder and Coffee, TBK Roleplay's GM talk show where we discuss all things TTRPGs and game mastering. I am Sarah Franco, the second baseman who insists she sees kobolds in the outfield, and one of your co-hosts this afternoon. My other host, as always, is the soccer goalie who'd rather be a gymnast, Luka.
Hi, today we will be talking about a variety of topics, starting with team brewing with an exceptional guest, Tony Vasinda. We will be accepting audience questions from all of you GMs and intrepid adventurers throughout the stream, so feel free to post them in chat. And before we get to all that, though, let's introduce our guest.
Tony is Chief Alchemist at plusoneexp, which is a brand that multiclasses in tabletop game design, beard, and skincare alchemy with the Bardic College of Content Creation. His passion is helping connect amazing designers with great players and is coincidentally one of the best people in the space. Welcome to Murder and Coffee, Tony. We're so excited to have you.
Thanks for having me. I almost pulled a Keegan or an Aaron and started going like rah, 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 while you were doing my intro.
I kind of wanted you to. The thing is I think I've maybe heard you get through the intro once uninterrupted. And so I was like, I just got to do one deep breath and just go. Just like,
here's the thing.
I
get through it uninterrupted a lot, as long as our good friends Keegan, Aaron has never interrupted me. Aaron just likes to make little like clapping hands, and Keegan will interrupt me every time I do it. And then I think I also have bad brain sometimes and just totally forget what I'm doing as well. But thanks for having me on. I am very excited to be here and very excited to talk about this because I run games a lot, but people don't see me run games almost ever because I refuse to run games and run stream at the same time. Because why would you do that? Why would you do that to yourself?
A glutton for self-punishment. I mean, that's the closest answer I can get. Before we get into the TTRPG stuff, because I do like coffee, I do like talking about it. I just need to share. This is the mug that I selected today. It's my Sandlot. You're killing me smalls. But this mug is literally the size of my head, which is a very fun fact.
It was excellent.
I like it a whole bunch.
But here's the important thing: is that an oversized mug or not?
Is it?
That's the real question.
No, it super is. This mug is massive.
This is just a normal 12
I am small. Mug. I am small, but this is gigantic. I bought it. Go for it. No, I want to. I saw your mug, and now I want to know. Because he had his face on it, and I was so happy, and that's it. It was a boring. Thanks, Tony. I told us a boring story. Can you tell us an exciting one now?
So I am drinking. I'm drinking lead.
Amazing.
So the Brain Trust, which is one of my favorite discords to hang out in, shout out to the Brain Trust, sometimes will kill channels when bad things happen in a channel, like when enough bad things are put in a channel, or a channel is not getting the functionality it needs to. Sometimes we'll have to kill it. We actually killed our main channel a little while ago by accident. We had to do a lot of things to bring it back to life. It was very complicated, but the Food and Bev Trust, which is where people talk about food, drink, other stuff like that. There was a discovery that G Fuel has lead in it. And the rabbit hole that we went down that day exploring the G Fuel, the fact that G Fuel has lead in it and it's illegal in some countries and not in others, caused us to have to make death saves. And for the first time ever, the death save was a tie. And so Adam Vass made some mugs to commemorate it. 13 saves, 13 fails, and this is in celebration of G Fuel's lead. So every time you drink out of this, you get a little bit of lead poisoning, and that's our first tip on how to murder people in today's Murder and Coffee. I've never watched the show before, but I'm assuming it's a bit that is an ongoing thing where we just give tips on how to murder.
This is the best way.
If it wasn't, it is now.
It is now, 100%.
And it always has been, if you ask me. I'll say that. My mug today has my own face because I went to Kelly Kapoor's party.
This is very good.
And that's how I got it.
I like that.
I'm a big Office fan, and my friend got this for me for my birthday.
Some people know this, some people don't. I spent 10 years in the coffee industry, so I also like talking about coffee on a far nerdier level than most people do.
This is amazing.
Yeah, and so I worked for Big Green for a little while. for the longest period of time, but I also have small independent coffee shops set up their roasting flavor profile and menus and do training for their staffs and then do light branding work with them also too. So that was a fun
Awesome.
like 3 years of my time in the coffee industry also too. So
you can teach me all the best coffee words and how to describe the things that I like.
Yeah.
Yes.
We'll go through some of the basics right now. All right. So the things you got to know. This is very similar to wine tasting, right?
I'm literally taking notes.
You want to be able to talk about the acidity. Acidity is one of the
I know that
primary
one.
things, right? But acidity can have a lot of effects. So like when a coffee, sometimes it's like we think about acidity as really just meaning like tart flavors, right? But acidity can do a lot of different things in coffee. So if you ever have a really like, you can have very dry acidity. So when you drink coffee, you kind of get an immediate kind of dry palate effect and kind of the feeling of like walnuts or other things like that. That's usually due to the acidity. And the second term, we'll talk about the body impacting each other. So moderate acidity, light body coffees. All right. So body is like the weight on the tongue that you're going to look at. So how heavy does it feel in your mouth? So if there's moderate to high acidity and light body, it's going to kind of evaporate really quickly. And you're going to get that dry quality, which is why a lot of Latin Americans, which is one of the three primary growing regions for coffee, coffees have those two qualities. And so that's why a lot of them have a lot of nutty flavors and aromas connected to them. After that, it's kind of like, what do you taste? Uniquely, human beings are very bad at knowing where aroma comes from. Like aroma is tied to memory. And so like, if you just say something smells like this, most people are actually not trained to try to figure out what a smell is.
Okay, I have a question.
Connect a smell to a memory and then know what it is. So if I tell you something tastes like blueberries, you're going to smell it, but you're going to call to mind the last time you smelled blueberries or tasted blueberries before you do that. Yes. What's the question?
So you're saying this, and I was gonna talk about my friend who he slings coffee and used to go to all these like coffee conventions or something, and he always bring back like strange beans and stuff, and then brew them and put them in little samplers for me.
Right.
One of them tasted like blood, and now I'm just very confused.
What are you confused about? Like, why do you know what blood
tastes? Why did it taste like blood to me? That's a weird thing, tied to memory, given what you just explained.
Yeah. Well, I mean, we've all tasted blood for the most part. Whether we want to think about it consciously or not, human beings taste a lot of blood in our lives. Right. And whether we're ready to deal with, and I'm seeing in the chat. Whether I'm human or not doesn't matter right now.
It's not relevant because he's not.
So like we understand like the coppery, like we're constantly tasting a lot of the flavors of blood. Because what our bodies are made out of has a lot of the flavors of blood. Like the inside of your mouth does taste like something. You're just used to what it tastes like, and so it doesn't taste that way anymore. So I was like, the chat's going wild, but it was just Harrison being amazing. And so I was like, and it was right as I was like talking about how we always taste the inside of our mouths. Anyways, yeah. So yeah, that's a big part of it. But like that kind of coppery tang that comes from the acidity also, it's probably slightly higher in body, and then some of like the tannin like palates have a higher like umami quality to them, and that's going to pull out a lot of meaty kind of bloody flavors. But also tasting is very like, there's some universal things we can kind of suggest when we do tasting, but it is very personal, right? Like the best way to do wine or coffee tasting is almost to evoke the experience. So dumb stuff like a barn in fall, right? Like that's what this coffee tastes like to me is actually a far better way of describing what something tastes like. It's may not be as explicit, but when you're tasting it for enjoyment and talking about it with people is a far better way to talk about it, because you're summing up like hay, but also muskiness, right? And some like very organic aromas and flavors, but then like the cool kind of edge of the air in fall. And
so that coffee tasted like Revenge in August.
Revenge in August.
There you have it.
A new blend coming to you from TPK.
Revenge in August. Also, I do have a new mission for this show, Luca. We will need to take notes. We need to figure out how to fit umami into every single episode because that made me very happy. I did like that. Everyone liked that.
Everyone liked that.
Everyone liked that. I'm gonna steer the ship a little bit because I will absolutely listen to you talk to me about coffee all day, every day.
And I'll do it.
I actually would though.
Because
we can just abandon the list if you want.
We're gonna
talk about coffee.
We're gonna create a new channel. Keegan is invited because they enjoyed that exchange so much. And I want to shift us into what we're here to talk about, which is TTRPGs. When did you start playing? How did you get into TTRPGs? How long have you been jamming? Tell me everything.
My first RPG experience was when I was like 8 or 9 years old. I went over to a friend's house, the Buchanans. We went from that friend's house to another friend's house. I have no idea who that person was because this was back in the 80s/early 90s when you just go to other people's houses and your parents didn't care because you ran over the entire neighborhood if you were white and lived in the suburbs. And the person's sibling had a red box set, and I played a half elf period. It was way more board gamey than it was a role-playing game because we didn't know what we were doing, and it was Dungeons and Dragons. And yeah, that was it. And I was like, this was a lot of fun. And then I had friends who were into like vampire and werewolf and a couple of other games when I got into middle school, high school. And I would always ask my mom, I grew up in Texas, would always ask my mom, hey, could you go to the Texas Game Hobby Store, RIP, Texas Game Hobby Store, and buy some D&D books for me? I would love to start playing with my friends. And my mom would always come back after the day when I had hounded her enough for her to say she was going and say, oh, they were sold out today. And I was literally 38 years old. I'm 39 right now, recounting this story to somebody else. And I was like, holy shit, it was just the satanic panic. There is no way that Texas Hobby Game Store did not have Dungeons and Dragons core books for players. Like, especially every single time my mom went.
Yeah, conveniently.
Yeah, my mom just didn't want to buy me Dungeons and Dragons books when I was a kid. Which, God bless my mom, because here's the deal. Like, the reality is, I got started really in RPGs playing GURPS when it was shifting from 3rd edition to 4th edition. And nobody knows enough about GURPS to know the distinctions between those.
I literally don't.
So, GURPS is a point-buy system. It is very crunchy, complex character creation. There's a lot of simulationist if you buy into that aspects of it. So it's like, how do you create the world you want to play in? Thousands of like resource books, each of which detail a very specific aspect of play. So like low tech or Vikings or Weird West or Western or whatever, like tons of different things that you could just buy these source books for. They would have different, you use a point-buy system to buy different abilities. But in play, GURPS is just roll 3d6, roll under your skill level. And so everything you need to know is on your character sheet, and all you need is 3d6 to play. The 3d6 bell curve is incredibly elegant. And I love it. And I love the modularity and toolkit aspect of GURPS. It influences a lot of my design and play even to this day. It's very modular. And once you're actually into the mode of playing, because you can literally spend hours building a character, even if you know what you're doing. And it's so much fun to play at the table. You can build incredibly detailed and specific worlds that do exactly what you want them to do. And not in the way that we say that for other popular systems, explicitly and specifically within the system. That's what it's designed to do. And so out of that, I loved that. I played just some other indie games. I played Dungeons and Dragons off and on. I would play other systems that my friend brought up. We got into 4th edition for a hot minute, specifically through the Gamma World expansions. And then that was about the time that indie RPGs were really starting to become more of a thing, that we would start to see more and more very small press publications come out and things like that. One Shot Network was starting to get started around that point in time. And so and I had a local game store now living in Seattle that carried a lot of indie RPGs because the owner was also a designer. And so just played a bunch of weird RPGs, listened to a lot of early podcasts about RPGs. I played in an Iron Kingdoms campaign for like 2 years, which is was not my favorite system. But I was really good at exploiting and had an excellent alchemy system, which I'm always a big fan of in a game. And yeah, now I play games like I play 3 or 4 different games a week, so lots of the time at this point in my life, and I read about 4 or 5 games a week. So play a lot of games.
That's awesome. I love it. One, I love I feel like most of the folks we've talked to, it's, I played Dungeons and Dragons, and like that's how I got here. So it's awesome to hear a different piece of that where it's like, no, literally my mom said no, so I played other dice games.
I remember my mom passive aggressively Southern mom said no. Like, I don't want to disappoint my child. I'll just say
Was out. Sorry.
Oh,
yeah,
sorry.
seriously.
I have always wanted to play GURPS because Discworld has a supplement for it.
Yeah.
And it's like, I just want to play Discworld, the RPG, please. So it's on my list of systems to try.
GURPS was like the go-to, hey, this system, like, because people weren't creating bespoke systems that, like, when a lot of IPs would come out. Like, so in Dungeons and Dragons at that point in time, people knew was not a good fit for every IP. And so like GURPS, lot of Fallout has roots in GURPS, even though it ended up not being the system that the video game operated on for a long time. It was going to be, so it's very easy to port back and forth. Hellboy had one early on. Discworld. There are a lot of other IPs that GURPS picked up because it was very easy to be like, hey, we're just going to create this. You got the core book, and then you got the source book that lets you play this. And lots of times the source book had like the light rules for the entire game in it, so you could just pick up the source book and play. Discworld was such an interesting one because it was so early in Discworld's history when that book came out. Like Terry Pratchett hadn't written, like, I'm trying to think about timeline. I don't think Moist even existed at that point in time in the books.
So it's pretty early then.
Yeah.
Before the Steam revolution.
Yeah, certainly. So like Vimes would have existed, but not been super influential.
That's the main thing.
Right.
So,
well, I mean, depends on who you are. Like I'm a Moist stan. And so, which is, I'm going to stop.
So here's the
that
thing.
because people
No.
don't know what I'm talking about. And I just said, I'm a Moist stan out loud.
Yeah. You heard it here first,
We're
folks.
going to pivot.
New channel coming soon. Moist stands.
I approve of this though. I mean, it's hard to like, it's not like there's a character that I don't like. No, yeah, it's anyone mentions the character and it's like, yes, that one too.
Yeah.
But I feel like Death and Vimes are the two for me.
Yes. Cole. Yes.
No, so yeah, it's before even a lot of the later stuff came out. So but the nice thing is GURPS is so modular, you could just pick it up, and like the expansiveness of Discworld works well in GURPS. But I would actually, if I was going to run GURPS, I would run it in Troika. Like, I think the flavor of Troika and the feeling of Troika matches.
I do not know Troika.
Discworld way better. So it's a British OSR game that you may have even seen stuff for, but it's a very simple 3d6 stat. But like, instead of having classes, it's got all these backgrounds that are just like 1 pages. Those give you skills and items.
Okay.
But they're all totally gonzo. Like, they're absolutely insane. And then you end up with a mix of these in a party. And the mix of these in the party kind of tells you what's important in this world right now, which I think actually is really like the ethos of Discworld. Like, it's not about, like, their wizards are going to be doing wizard stuff in the background, right? Like, postal system's going to be fixed over here. Nari is going to be doing whatever. Death is going to show up and like talk to people for a second and then kill them, or
hang out with some
for
cats.
a very long time, right? Yeah. But whoever's in the book right then, what they do and what they are good at is what's going to matter.
Yeah, that's
in
the
this
focus.
Story immediately, and it's going to be weird, right? And something you never would have suspected that they're good at is all of a sudden going to matter. And Troika, it's very rules light, but it 100% plays that way. It also has like the swingiest initiative system in out of any RPG for combat. So, yeah,
swingiest.
Like you can not go do the Troika initiative while you're playing because you drop a bunch of tokens in a bag, and you shake that bag up, and like you might be like, I have 2 tokens in there, but if the bad guys may have like 40 tokens in there. Then there's also a
Gotcha.
token in there that just ends the round. You put all the other tokens back in and start it. So if that's the case, and you've got like 8 tokens for the party members, and then like you're fighting a very fast or very strong thing, and it's attacking a lot, so it's got a lot of tokens in there, you might draw that end of round bead and never have gone.
That's amazing. That's
Or you
amazing.
might go twice in a row. Yeah. Or the bad guys might not go, right? And so it's a very weird initiative system.
I love that though. Like, just because the pure chaos that would ensue, like,
Absolutely.
like there's no planning really.
Yeah, there's no, okay, I'm up in 5 rounds. Let's go.
Yeah.
Let's go.
Yeah, I love that. That would be so bonkers to run.
We've got like 3 Troika streams coming up in the next couple of weeks, so I'll send
Okay.
you all the details.
Yes.
So that anyone you want to hop on.
Yes, for
And so,
sure.
solid Keegan endorsement in the chat. Troika was fun. I'd play it again.
There you go. You
Solid.
heard it. You heard it from Keegan. First, honestly, here's the deal. If Keegan makes a recommendation, I'm gonna look at it. I'm like, yeah, okay, all right. I'm about it.
The art is absolutely gonzo. Hold on.
Oh heck yeah, we're gonna get a book and everything.
And get a book.
I'm highly supportive of this. Oh heck yeah. Oh heck yeah.
This is the Troika core book.
Oh,
right?
I love it.
So like these are the
Look that I'm like-
backgrounds, right?
Oh my
Yeah, like
gosh.
I don't have my document cam set up, right? So like you
Yeah.
get this absolutely bizarre art. This is Fever Swamp. It's like a hex crawly point crawl type thing.
Mhm.
Oh
But like
my
you get all this
gosh.
kind of like hyper grotesque art. Also
Yeah.
too. Like it's very science
Amazing.
fantasy. This is a very like Dune-ish feeling setting, but
Mhm.
it's
Yes.
still totally even more
I'm there.
bizarre, right? Like it's got a beautiful map right in the front.
Oh,
right. So anyways,
awesome. This is very good. This is very good. I'm adding it to my list of games to play.
I have taste, Keegan says.
They're not
and,
wrong.
And you have taste, and right now, part of that taste is the inside of your mouth.
That we now know tastes like
So-
blood. We just don't realize it.
So aware of my tongue right now.
Oh, so Tony, when we talked, I reached out to you and I was like, Tony, I want you to come onto the show. Well, time out. You came into the chat and were like, this is interesting. I want to come on the show. And I was like, we
Yeah.
also want you on the show. Please come on the show. And I was like, Tony, what do you want to talk about though? And you brought up, you mentioned the topic of never rolling dice in a session, like as a specific call out.
Yeah.
And I want to why? Because I feel
Okay.
like that goes against a lot of like the reasons people play TTRPGs. They want those click clack rocks.
I as a GM never want to roll dice in a session. I think it's fine to say I never want to. Players don't want to roll dice either. That's fine also too. There are plenty of great dice systems. Mine was specifically about GMs. Like a GM technique for me is I don't roll dice in a session. I might roll dice before a session. If you see me pick up a dice as a GM while I'm running, it's super rare, and it usually means like I need to pull something off a table really quick. But even then, I'd rather just say roll a d6 because you don't know what's on the table, right? Like, you don't know what I'm going to pull off. And so, or maybe you do, but it also doesn't matter. So I think anything I can do to reduce my cognitive load as a GM is helpful to what I'm actually there to do, which is facilitate myself and everybody else having a good time in the way that we've agreed to have a good time, which could be telling a great story. But if that's the case, then someone has to be kind of keeping a beat on the narrative movement of the game in a way that the other players shouldn't have to, outside of their character and their plot points. And if that's the case, that should be the GM. Somebody has to figure out how all the factions are moving in the background. If you're playing a complex game with a lot of social interaction and community groups, that's going to be the GM. I'm going to be doing a lot of other things with my brain. One of those should never have to be rolling dice and doing math.
Math. Yeah, that's the important part. I support this.
Yeah, there's other better things I can do. Also, the weird conversations that like sprout up around, do you ever fudge dice rolls? The answer is yes for me. Like, and so at that point, like, I had to ask myself, why am I ever rolling dice? Like, why don't I just say the thing that I think should happen? Because I'm the GM and I can do that. And if the game says I can't, then I'll probably just play a different game. And that's not to like screw with my players. That's not the intent. Actually, lots of the time it's because I want the good idea to happen. And so rather than me roll, I should just say like, oh, this is easy enough. I'm not going to roll a dice. You don't need to roll a dice. You've set this up. You've planned this out. We should just let it happen. Why are we rolling dice, right? And oftentimes it's like for the rare chance of a critical failure or like a critical success. Why? Like why? At that point in time, we're basically saying like, this is such a good thing that we all want to see happen. Maybe we want to create a narrative beat of tension, right? I would rather turn to the player and say, what are you summoning up inside of your character right now to make sure that you know you drive this hit home, right? And letting them respond to what's happening in their character. I would much rather invite them to tell me something that matters to make sure they don't fail than have the tension of, oh, but what if they do, even though mathematically it's very unlikely and none of us actually want them to. And then just next story beat, right? I'd rather pause and say, what's something else we can do in this space that enhances our experience of play, lets you kind of unveil something, add something in, or do whatever it takes to eliminate that last little bit of concern. Also, I don't care about that last little bit of concern almost ever.
That's fair. So how do you structure that though? Like, is it in the prep? Is it just something you've just decided, like, I'm not rolling dice, so whatever happens in the game happens? Like, what does that look like from you getting ready to run a game?
Yeah, so there are a lot of player-facing games where the intent is the GM does not roll dice. So like a lot of OSR games do this, but a lot of story games and PBTA games do this also too. It's like the players are the ones who roll the dice. That's not what the GM does. And playing through those games initially, like, you as the GM want to feel like you're playing also, and players roll dice. And so I think we oftentimes get drawn into doing that. And even in some of the games I've written, but even especially in my early running, lots of times, like, I would use like 2-tier like luck rolls. Like, I'm going to roll a dice, you're going to roll a dice, you're going to tell me if you think your dice is higher or roller. Why don't I just pick a number between 1 and 6 and let you roll a dice and then tell me if you think it's higher or lower? It achieves the exact same thing. Like, it doesn't change anything on that. And so I do roll dice in prep, right? So a lot of, if I know, hey, I've got to figure out some random encounters in this room, or I want to prep a couple of moments, or hey, I know we're probably going to be going this direction, I'll roll a few dice. Or sometimes I'll just roll 5 dice that are the primary dice a GM would roll in advance. I'll just write down the numbers and I'll just X them off as we go down that list, because like, I know that we all feel like I do. Like, when I used to play Risk, like way more than anybody ever should, I would want to roll at the exact right moment that the probability would come out exactly in my favor. And that doesn't actually exist. And I understand this tactile satisfaction of that. But I've also learned that there's better things I can do as a GM with my time and mental energy than beating my players in a roll. And so I think rolling is actually, and this is for me, because I'm a decently competitive person. But I think this is actually inhabits a lot of GMs' minds. I think rolling, especially opposed rolls, creates an immediately adversarial reality between players and GMs that I'm actually not looking to reinforce. Like, I'm not looking to reinforce an adversarial reality across the table between me and my players. Now, opposed rolls between players, if they're opposing each other, go nuts, right?
Yeah.
And if I feel that needs to happen, even, I can still just say to another player, like, why don't you roll a dice for me? Like, I don't have to bring dice to a session as a GM. It also takes away the question of, are you fudging dice if I'm never making rolls? Because I'm not. But Morkborg does this, PBTA does this, Together We Go games do this. And it's really funny, like, really experienced GMs who I love playing with will get behind the screen for one of these games and be totally at a loss for what to do, because all of a sudden they're not rolling dice and they're totally freed up to do other things that I think are more important around, building out, like, managing the game, like, specifically leading to things like team brewing, motif building, helping build out the narrative. Like, I want to be doing those things and I want to be focused there. I don't want to be trying to beat my players at a roll.
100%.
You mentioned team brewing. Can you explain for us all, what is it? And how is it done well?
Oh man, how's it done well? Like that's something I still am exploring, though it is a thing I do a lot of. And it is a kind of, I wouldn't say it's necessarily a higher level of play. It's a very different cultural way of playing than we currently have in a lot of games. But team brewing kind of decentralizes the role of GM prep and GM ownership and makes a more egalitarian table space. So team brewing is basically saying, I have not decided everything that's going to happen in this game. I, as the GM, show up having done 15 to 20 minutes of prep. You could do more than that if you want to. You can take hours to prep still. Like you can still team brew even if you're a major prep GM, but you're leaving major plot points open. So PBTA does this. It's like, draw a map, leave holes is the common way that Powered by the Apocalypse games voice this, right? You're saying, hey, the GM is going to kind of go, what are some of the big things happening in the world, right? And then as you play, you're going to ask players questions, or you're going to let players have control over certain aspects of this. Again, this lowers the cognitive load for a GM and lets them focus specifically on, again, depending on the game that you're wanting to play, what can the GM, the person helping manage the game, do best? At its highest, team brewing actually looks almost like GM-less play, right? It looks like you're playing like as a group of people who all of a sudden someone has a great idea and we're just going to run with it at the table, because actually you can tell like in that moment everyone's bought into this being the best thing, right? And as the GM, I don't have to pretend like I thought of that in advance. I can just name that was a great idea by a player. We're just going to run with it, or turning to them and saying, telling me what it looks like. I had a guy's first time GMing, longtime player, super nervous about GMing. At one point just turned to us and in a market scene was like, hey, you two aren't in the scene. You're going to play this NPC. You're going to play that NPC. Your goal is to get a date with this player. Your goal is that you're a jealous ex-girlfriend.
I love
here's
that.
here's the scene. Go, right? With full consent for everybody. This was a thing they were willing to engage in, but it kept them from having to do a three-way dialogue with themselves. They just gave us quick marching orders on, here's your name. Here's what you want. We're going to get into the situation. We're going to find it out. But things that we spun out in that, he absolutely honored us. Yeah, things that came out of that, he had to deal with the fallout of those moments because he didn't want to voice 3 NPCs at the same time. And it was one of the best, like, Amazon who's never been in town negotiating for a nice set of knives conversation ever. Because
very specific, but okay.
It was
I love it.
It was what it was, right? Like
amazing.
That was 100%.
That happened to me once. It was wild.
Yeah.
Crazy.
And so, but it was like the most fun any of us had ever had watching this, I'm going to go to market and buy some things, but I don't know what money is, conversations ever unfold, because impressing this girl who he had broken up with was the guy's major objective. So it was like, look, if you'll just flirt with me while you're buying these knives, they're yours at the end of this. I'm just trying to make her jealous. Like, like if we can do that, that would be great. I'm not looking for anything more than that, like rock and roll, let's go. And so it was a lot of fun, right? But handing players that kind of ownership in a space. And again, if they're comfortable with it, right? If they're if they're open to that. But it can also be just like the larger narrative hooks, right? When we ask players to describe, what their character is wearing or what their tech looks like in a sci-fi setting, we're engaging in a level of team brewing because we're letting them say something about the world that's going to start to influence the way of it. So team brewing is really leaning more deeply into that. As the GM, then it becomes your responsibility to kind of consistently manage what the players give you, take it back in and connect it to the major threads in the world. But like I said, really good team brewing, high level, when you have good play culture developed at your table, like you start to step away from even knowing who's running the game. And we'll see this on stream sometimes when you watch people who have played together a lot. If you watch Keegan, Aaron, I, and Max and some other people play together, like it's great. Or even like Sarah was on stream a little while ago. We were playing Justicar, which is by Nevin Holmes.
So good.
Coming out this month. Go to ttrpg.link/Justicar-KS. I'm probably not. I think it's actually just it's let it rip.bytes. I don't know. Just go check out Justicar. It's going to be amazing. It's coming out this week. But it's a GM-less game, but it essentially is a team brewed game. Like it's not just, hey, this is it, but we kind of established some things at the very beginning, and I was the judge but everybody got to say something the judge preferred. And
Yes.
Sarah was beautifully the stand. Every single witness in the game, even surprise witnesses with different costumes for every single one that we called as we went. One person was the prosecution, one person was the defense, but everybody had ways to insert lore and reality into the game as we played. And now all of a sudden, now this thing is, and it was tremendous. It's a tremendous amount of fun.
Yeah.
Even though at different points, different players have control over what is happening. And it's just a really cool way to play. But in the same way, I think it's also great when the GM can be a player again. And I think team brewing really helps you engage in that, because I can spend a lot of time prepping if I enjoy that, or I can spend the amount of time that a player character does by reviewing their character sheet, updating their moves, checking their notes if they're that type of player. Like they're going to spend 5 to 15 minutes doing that. I can prep a 3 to 4 hour session of Down We Go. I can also prep a 60-minute session, this one, but I can prep a very long session of Down We Go by rolling like 5 dice in advance to just do some random things coming up, and then asking the players questions and talking with them and letting them have a lot of ownership into what's happening over the course of the next 3 to 4 hours. And I can do that in about 10 minutes also too. And it lets me come to the table as a player, right?
I love that statement right there. It lets the GM come as a player. Like, I think for me, in my experience GMing, like I prep heavy. Hello, hi, prep heavy GM for sure. I mean, it's either prep heavy. I've got like pages of like outline, or I'm literally just showing up with like 2 keywords and we're just going with it. Right. And what I like, even as you're talking, like for me, that's the goal. Like that's the direction for me, and it resonates with me so much, because that pressure of like, and I see it in a lot of games like Powered by the Apocalypse. Sorry, I've got wires crossed. But like players will be given that control, and they'll look at the keeper like, what do I do? Like, what do I do? And it's just do whatever you need to do, bud. And giving players that option for engagement, giving them the control and seeing the magic that comes from it. Like from as simple as my gun looks like this, or no, there's a city that's their currency is completely squid based. Like it just, the magic of storytelling lives in that space. So when you invite that to your table, and what you used, table culture, there was like
table culture, culture of player table culture,
and like really crafting that to be everyone's ideas here are valuable and they're all a part of the story that we're telling, instead of I am the GM and I must have the most creative ideas and I must blow your minds with this cool story that only I crafted and you interact with. Like it just completely dismantles that.
Right. And you spend 6 hours doing that.
Yes.
Right? If you do prep, and then you come in and people steamroll an entirely different direction, and as a GM you're like, I still had a fun time playing. Why did I spend that time doing that? Here would be my counterpoint. If you are a high prep GM, that's great. That's wonderful. Make the notes you want to share with your players around where you want them to go. Not the reveals, right? Because as a GM, you're going to have reveals that you want to drop that are important to you, that matter, that you're going to want to hold close if you're doing. But like, if you're playing with people who value your time and want you to be doing that, then you should be able to come to the table, in my opinion, as a GM, to those players and say, hey, here are some of the beats I think we might hit over the course of the next, and we can hit them in whatever order y'all want to go to, but here are some of the things I've kind of prepared. If a GM came to me and said that, I would be like, awesome.
Yeah.
I'm not gonna go, I don't know
spoilers
if I can cuss or not.
Yes, you can.
I'm not going to go, fuck you. I don't care if you spent 6 hours doing this. I just want to do a shopping trip today. I'm going to go, cool. I was hoping to shop first. Can we do that? And then I would be super interested in picking this out, right? And you can do that diegetically in the game, or not diegetically, like out of the game. Like you can do it however you want to. But I think when we can as GMs honor, like have our time be honored and honor the player's agency, and have those things be a very open conversation. It's never on a one-shot stream, like we're all streamers, like never on a one-shot stream when the GM's like, you're going to the castle. Are we like, no, screw you. Like we're here to showcase your game or to play a game, but I'm not doing that. Right. And there are players who will do that. And I think that's them and I don't want to play with them. Like on a one shot, like at a table, that's maybe I do, maybe I don't, who knows? But if somebody's put the time and the energy, and I want to honor that. And I think there are ways to do that even for high prep. I don't do high prep. I tweeted about this a couple weeks ago. One of my children who plays 5th edition was like, we were talking about their D&D club at middle school, and they were like, yeah, I got to use almost all of the pieces of dialogue I had pre-written. And I was like, oh, you and I are very different GMs. Because I'm like, I didn't write. I know generally what this player's what I think this NPC is gonna maybe say if we encounter them, but probably not even that much. Like, I'm like, nope, I don't even know their name yet. We're gonna figure that out while we're in the middle of playing. I know they're a prince or a princess or a liege, and we're gonna figure out what they're doing when we get in there, and then they're gonna have some sort of weird monologue that I'll have to figure out on the spot, and that's fine. But I don't write down pieces of dialogue and rehearse them in advance.
I've never had a word for this, but I'm glad I do now, like team brewing, because like I always just tell my players, like, you're able to speak truth into the world, like what is happening, or how I've done it. I've talked about this before, but with my campaigns, I always plan the ending first, so I know where we'll end up, and I plan like how we start and maybe 2 or 3 main beats between, and then I don't plan the rest. And it's just like, what are you doing? How do we get there? Like, I know what's
for real. Yell at my computer. Here, we're back. Sorry, gang.
Okay. I don't know where we ended.
I don't know. I can recap what happened last time.
Do we need to Team brewing. We have a word for it now. I'm excited. I always plan the ending of a campaign first, the beginning, and maybe 3 beats in between, and the players build and get through.
And that means everybody might have missed my plug, also too.
Start with your plug.
So for Down We Go, which is our house OSR system, like I have a similar technique, especially when I'm teaching the game, running one shots, but just also to establish some plot beats. Which I think is okay when you're the GM. I think you get to do that. That's one of the things you get to do, especially if you're not rolling dice, is decide here's a plot beat. But you can go to ttrpg.link/DWG live to pre-order Down We Go in physical, or you can go over to our itch page and check it out there. Also too for digital. But it's our house OSR system, but it's highly narratively driven. And so like when I'm playing, I might tell the players, there's 4 of them. We see a set of 4 figures silhouetted in front of a giant tower whose architecture defies the rules of reality as you know it. Windows seem to be not quite at the right angles, and there's purple electricity arcing. And then I'm going to ask them 3 or 4 questions about what they've heard about this thing, and then I'm going to flash back to a couple of days before, when they're getting this mission, right? So I'm going to establish narratively as GM Fiat, you're going to this tower. We're going to end up there. That's not debatable at this point in time, because that's where we're going.
I like this strategy.
Right, but I've let you tell me some things about that tower that have then got you involved in wanting to get there and explore whatever weird stuff you just said, and then we're going to take that time to discover who hired them. How they know each other, do entanglements, hit the market if you want to hit the market with whatever weird prepay coin you got that we're just going to fiat in, because I love a shopping trip also, don't we all? Wander through some districts around the city, like get a chance to take their time, and they can get there however they want to, right? And sometimes there are bandits chasing them because they made some poor rolls as they were moving around the city, and that's part of just the ethos of that game. But we know we're going there, and one of the interesting things is when you engage in this type of play, as a GM, it's actually far more comfortable for me to just be able to say, this is, because I'm giving up so many other points of freedoms that when I want to say this is, I feel like we've all been able to do that. And so as the person whose primary job it is to help kind of refine and consolidate the reality of this thing and help us all kind of hold it in our minds, that I have a little bit of extra oomph that I can flex from a time standpoint and just beat that kind of stuff in, narrative beat, but also, if a player's acting out sometimes.
Literally.
And so, like, there's a lot of those things I think are totally appropriate. I also love, like, starting in media res and flashing back, right? Like,
I love flashbacks. I love flashbacks.
And so I think it's such a fun thing to do. And the game doesn't have that mechanic written in. It's just how I run it. It's a totally a GM technique thing for me that I feel like really well establishes that and lets us start with a moment of team brewing and a moment of wonder together and a moment of world building and community, and then go back and now tell me who your characters are and tell me if you know, like, do you have a deep connection with the Dirt Liquor faction? I don't know. Right, by Aaron King. But I hope that one of you does. And what kind of weird dirt have they sent you here to like get for them to bring back for their eldritch tasting rituals? Like, I don't know. Let's find out. Let's have that conversation. Let's do that. And I don't have to come up with a narrative reason for those things. We're going to do all those together. But we are going to go to this weird tower. And you are going to explore it as far as
we know you end up there, and
Right.
you know you end up there, which is the important part. I have a quick question before. I know it's not on the list, but you said the mechanic isn't something built into the game. It's just how I run it, which is how I feel like I run every single thing I run. It's like whether it's D&D or something else, there's always a little bit of Monster of the Week thrown in. There's a little bit of something else, and just sometimes smash cut, and then sometimes just my own thing. It's very much like we are borrowing these mechanics from this system, but ultimately we're here just building a story together, and we're gonna just kind of run this Luka style. Is there a system you have found that perfectly meshes with your personal style?
So I write games. So
yes. Okay, but so even if I were to write a game, I feel like I would write a game specifically because I have an idea, right? And it's like, oh, I want to write a game for this very specific kind of thing, or this kind of crunch, or this kind of, is there one that you've made or written for yourself that is kind of all encompassing? This is my style in a game.
So every game I write is the GM section, and even games I have high influence on. So like Marcus Linderum is the writer of Down We Go, but Through the Void, which is the space version of it, will look different because I'm writing it, and because I've had the honor of being able to build that system out with Marcus, and then say, but here's the stuff I really love, and here's how I want to build it in. And so like, I love something called motif building, which I mentioned earlier. Motif building comes from Swords Without Master, right? Phenomenal sword, sand and sorcery, or sword and sandal, however you want to call it. Conan-esque, right? RPG about powerful swords. And you, as you go, you kind of like players, there's a little bit of a team brewing concept in it, where like, you're going to name things that are important, and the GM's going to write them down on index cards, right? And those things are going to kind of become their notes for symbols and themes that matter in the game. And I'm like, man, that's such great narrative tech. There's no mechanical crunch though, right? Which is fine. But I think players, especially people who are used to very mechanically heavy systems like Dungeons and Dragons 5th edition, or other forms of D&D, or GURPS or other things like that, are very used to, but tell me mechanically how this is helpful.
Yes.
For me, right? And so like my first game I ever created, which got a random shout out on a stream like 2 days ago. Somebody was like, oh, here's my favorite weird indie RPG. And it was my game Beards and Beyond. No one,
Amazing.
I don't know if anybody's ever played Beards and Beyond. It was my first RPG. No one ever
comes
talks
highly
about
recommended.
it. And so
someone on stream.
Somebody on stream, I was like, that's my game. And they were like, what? And I was it has a piece of tech, because I loved motifs, and I loved watching my friend, specifically Alexi Sargent, who runs Cloven Pie Games, use them for a game called The Great Soul Train Robbery, which has been on TPK on Top Shelf.
Yep.
And we're playing in a couple weeks over on our stream. So for Beards, one of the things I did was like, I love motif creation. All of my GM sections when I write them are just like, here's how I GM this game specifically. And it's usually just GM techniques put into the form, because like, if I've got secrets, first of all, I don't believe in a lot of secrets. I think if there's secrets in play, the GM should just hold them close to their heart. But I think they're better when they narratively match and come out and play. And so like, I don't have a ton of secret stuff happening behind the scenes, but I think adventures are kind of a little bit sacrosanct, right? Like if an adventure has been written and stuck in a game, leave that to the GM until after you've played it, and then you can read through it if you want to. But I made it so like the motifs go in the middle of the table, and anyone can create a motif when they want to, but the GM helps manage and marshal the motifs. And so it could be, but a motif is how a player emotionally sees and interacts with the world, right? Like, and it's the thing that a lot of times, like for me as a player, I want the weird random things in my pockets and the emotional experiences of my character to matter in the world, right?
Yes.
I want those things to matter.
Yeah.
And I want the weird metal that we find and I built a sword out of to matter, right? And I want the crazy berries that we've made wine out of matter. Like, I want all that stuff to matter. And I want it to be able to name it mechanically, because I think for players who have never engaged in that side of playing before, it helps them to have the handholds of, well, I'll get a +1 if I narratively work this thing into what my character is doing.
Yeah.
So how would I do that, right? So for beards, I'll have players talk about how they get sucked into the Whiskerverse. It's all about people with facial hair, and the facial hair provide the power. There are 4 stats: length, thickness, style, and growth. Go check it out over at ttrpg.link/.
Sorry guys, Murder and Coffee's canceled. We need to go play this game later.
But anyways,
right now.
happy to play it anytime on TPK or with anybody.
Yeah.
But like they're gonna get sucked into the Whiskerverse from their normal lives. So I'm gonna ask them what their job are, what are the normal circumstances, and I'm going to write down something about their experience of like walking through the club that they're at, and the sound of the drums becomes overwhelming to my character and I black out. Great. I'm going to write down in a motif the sound of drums that overwhelms us, right? And
that's amazing.
And so then anytime somebody's like the wind blowing through the trees is like the sound of drums rhythmically beating on each other, what they're telling me is I want +1 in this situation for naming the thing that's in the middle of the table. And if you build them up, if you use them enough time and all of them have been used, like if you've been able to leave a bunch of stuff in narratively, then you can get a +3 on one roll, and then it either resets or it disappears.
That's awesome.
So you're creating these short-term narrative beats by building motifs over and over. But like, this is like everything I love about playing. It's figuring out how to take that little bitty thing and then work with the other players to weave that into the way that we defeat Strahd, right? Or whatever. Like,
it's taking the things that are naturally happening anyways that people care about and like making it matter. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
like whether
mechanical,
making there like a benefit and like making it more meaningful than just like, hey, here's that callback to that thing. Like, no, this is who we are as a party, and this is the story that we're telling. And I love that. And I would say all of the games that like I've really enjoyed have strong motifs anyways. So getting that like that advantage to like continue winning, like is awesome. Right. I love that.
And it gets players to start thinking on a player level also.
Right.
Like, how does my character feel about this? It gets them in and on that level, because like it might be things like I played a kind of a dandy character at one point in time in a Wild West game. I was like a reporter, but I was really, and so like I was told we were going down the Primrose Express, so my character showed up and like total primrose like suit from top to bottom, just assuming everybody was going to come fashionably in theme. And no one else did. So then we were in the caboose of this train that we were getting ready to rob, and I'm like going through luggage and pulling out like swatches, other things with clothes, and trying to like just gussy everybody up a little bit. But like Alexi just wrote like pink beats red, like because I was like holding up red versus pink. I was like toss the red over my shoulder. I was like, oh, how gauche, right? Like it's like Alexi's just like pink beats red, right? And that was now a motif within the game. And
amazing.
So it's just and it's noting like you're doing such a great job as a player right now. Let's name this thing and make it matter. If you're going to invest time at the table in this, just like we want to honor the GM's time away from the table, we want to honor the players' time, all the players' time at the table.
Right.
And motifs are such a phenomenal way to do that. And you don't have
just
to
write this down. Work motifs into every game.
Well, and that's my thing. Like,
we've run with pretty strong motifs. Sarah was talking about it today after our hiccups about how this land is built on and she's wearing this like heart of all these like
Barovia is built on the suffering of women. Yeah,
basically. And she's like wearing the heart of like one of these like abused, like these dryads that were dying and being tortured. But like I feel like so many, like Sarah said, all my favorite games that I
Right.
both play in and built have motifs already, but
my
just
head-
not
yeah.
with mechanical backing.
My head's already going Bard's Refrain with Bird handing out tokens, or
my
my
little unique rocks or bits of whatever that
Yeah,
I
and,
found
like,
around.
picking that up, or it's just, I feel
Because
like
I just save them in my inventory. It's like, what did I pick up today? And then I'd
Yeah.
hand it out like 3
Yeah.
episodes later.
I feel like as a new GM, it can be so overwhelming to like come to a table and be like, I have to build and make this interesting and do all of these things, and like it's taking that focus away from like the self and like what you're doing and putting it back out to the table, making their actions like actually matter. Like we hear things like the dice tell the story and all of that stuff, and that's true, but I love the shifting of focus to the players tell the story. Right, exactly. Like like how true is that statement? Really making that like engaging with the players more. And as a GM, first of all, your table's going to be rad as fuck. And like you're not going to be stressed out. You're going to have a better time because now you're another player. Like it's such a beautiful, wonderful idea.
And in the same way, I want players to show up at that tower and the description that we weave, the beginning to strike wonder and awe in them. I, as a GM, want to experience wonder and awe at the table. I think the number one thing that keeps us from feeling like players as GMs is that we don't.
Yeah, there's no
experience
surprise.
That.
Yeah.
And when you can break your GM, like when you can wow them, when you can make them laugh, when you can make them tear up because of like those are win moments at the table for everyone, right? And so like I love seeing those kind of things. And I think, like I said, so for me, like anytime I'm writing a game, I'm just writing the tech that I think people should run games with. I don't understand putting things in a GM section that have anything to do with besides GM advice and adventures. Like those are the things. Like, so I'm going to give you tech that's GM facing tech, but it's really more like you own this process, but usually it's still player facing, right? Like I said, in most of my games, if the GM rolls dice, it's like, hey, you're going to set a threshold number. And that was usually before I realized I could just set a threshold number, right? Like I can just pick, like this time I'm going to pick a 1 or a 2 or whatever on a high, low, and they've got to roll and decide if they think they're high or low than me. Great. Like all those things are valid things to do as a GM, but like what I want to do is just focus on enhancing the place. So motif building is one of my main ones. Like tracking the narrative, inviting players, especially like inviting players to own a certain point of it, and getting people team brewing are a lot of the things that I will focus on as a GM. And there are some people who are like, that's the GM job, I don't want to do that. That's great. Then you and I should have either let somebody else run and I'll just come in as a player. If I'm running, then maybe this is not the table for you. And that's okay also too. Like those things are good to define, but yeah, like I don't care if motifs give you a hard mechanical mode. I just know that there are enough mechanical minded players that it's good to give those handholds. But I remember like the highest praise I ever got for the motif system was somebody saying like, oh, this is like inspiration from Dungeons and Dragons, but I know how to use it and it works. And I was like, oh, that's great. Yeah. Because I don't know anybody who ever uses inspiration like in a game, because we're not exactly sure if this is the time to use it. Right. Like, or how to do it.
See, and that's my thing. Inspiration for me is like, you said a thing that I thought was cool. Here you go. Like inspiration is just like, here's me saying hell yes to that. And so making it so it's not just the GM that's doing it. Everybody's doing it. It's just, again, it creates that like that trust at the table, that investment, and like honors the social contract of playing a TTRPG, right? We're here to have a good time. We're here to tell a story together. Here's ways that we can measure and share that. It's awesome.
Yeah, I've heard of tables where like players can give inspiration to each other with Dungeons and Dragons, but like this is just that a step further and better.
And like Fate does that. Fate lets players hand fate points around to each other in different ways also too. And there are some other games that are like belonging outside belonging games are largely like, we're going to pass, power around the table to each other as we kind of pull it out of the middle pot. And then eventually we're going to make these stronger moves. They build in a very similar way, and it's very direct and egalitarian. And so, those are largely designed to be GM-less systems, right? They're not intended necessarily to have a GM running things. And so there are games, so PBTA games do some of this stuff that I really, really like.
Yeah.
And I think we're a huge piece to me opening this up. Jeremy Gage from Draw Your Dice and I were like talking about this on stream yesterday. I had a character that I decided was very turtle influenced. It's a cyberpunk game. And so all of their mods had like TRTL in the name. And
Amazing.
like one was shell and one was head. Right. But at one point in the digital world, I was facing I can't even say it. I was facing like
simulacrum
of a person who had died that had been built into like an AI reincarnation of them, and they tried to flood me with their experience of death. And I was like, sweet, I'm just gonna, like, my character had high analysis, I'm gonna let all the data hit me. I'm gonna take whatever, and it's like a Blades in the Dark, Forged in the Dark like style system. So I'm putting myself at risk. I'm like, I'm just gonna let it hit me, but I'm gonna start just soaking up the different points in their experience of death that are their most despairing moments. And I'm going to start looping the code from those things together on the fly. And then I'm going to think about my most despairing moment, and I'm going to loop that back into this code. And I'm just going to shoot the despair of their death back at them, right? Like, this is the final move that wiped this thing out mechanically as we were going, but it was the guy had set it up where it was like mode shift for video game bosses also too. So we had just hit the third mode shift. So this was like them flooding me with their death. I'm like, I'm just gonna take it, but I'm gonna take my despair of getting hurt, and I narrated the flashback to get the extra dice and set things up to my moment of greatest despair and loss. Weaved into another player's backstory, and then shot this back at
you can't see it. I'm
DJ
literally
Shiva.
getting cold chills right now.
I know. This sounds like such an amazing moment at the table.
Have cold chills.
Right. That stuff is because the GM like asked just ahead of time, hey, do you like an authoritative GM, or how comfortable are y'all with collaboration and world building? And like Sammy, who's playing with Sarah and I on Monday for an Extremist Solar side, was one of the players. Jeremy Gage was one of the players, and then two of the creators are the players. And we're like totally comfortable with that. Sammy likes scenes set up for them, but Jeremy's like a FITD pro and is like knows how to like exploit the system to the nth degree, and narratively also too. And so like we're just like consistently weaving these things and like passing the spotlight back and forth to each other as I'm in VR, because I'm the only person who's good at coding out of all of our runners, and they're out in the real world like getting like the crap beat out of them while I try to deal with this problem inside, right? And so, but like I was able to touch other people's story in my flashback in a narrative way that pulled everybody in to that beat in the moment. And that was all through just like pulling this motif thread through the entire thing. And there wasn't a rule written in for that, but we were able to take the rules and say like, flashback rules are kind of motif building, right? They're letting me say, I can't just say, hey, I put this in the whatever. I can also go back to a memory. It's a bad memory and think about why I'm driven at this point and push myself a little bit harder because of that. And those are the kind of things that I would rather do than just be like, oh, roll a dice to see if you critically failed. No, screw that. Tell me what horrible thing happened in your past. It's a deep memory that you're drawing on right now to make sure you don't fail in this moment.
Right.
And once you've done that, you hit them. Like, tell me what it looks like as you
so powerful.
I love that.
This
I love
DJ
that.
AI into the ether, right? And so
it's so good. Listen, I'm gonna jump in because we're just past the hour mark, and I'm gonna institute a break. I know.
And I talked about coffee and other stuff for
No, I'm so happy. This is so great. So we're gonna go take a quick intermission so we can either heat up our coffee or grab liquids or snacks and stuff. Just a shout out to the chat. We want you to be a part of the conversation as well. So if you have questions about any of the topics that we've talked about, or just questions about TTRPGs in general that you would like to know more about Tony's perspective, hit them up in chat because we are keeping an eye on that. And we'll be back in just a few minutes. So stay tuned. And we're back. I hope that our chat friends went and rehydrated. I'm going to drink entirely too much coffee, but that's okay.
No such thing.
My heart would beg to differ. Oh, when you can
Yeah.
feel,
No such thing.
when you can feel like it's not electricity, but it's something adjacent. Like it just static in your bone marrow. That's when I know like I probably done goofed.
You can feel time killing your body.
Correct. Like every single cell is like sloughing off and dying, and you can feel that sensation. Like it's like, oh
Yes.
yes, probably too much.
And I want to read something real quick as we come
Yes.
back. This is faction number 2 in Down We Go, The Dirt Lickers by Aaron King. Charged by holy writ and protected by city laws, these dry-tongued pilgrims can be seen licking and eating the various flavors of dirt, sand, clay, and soil all across the city. They pay extra for exotic flavors of particulate extorted from dungeons. Late at night in hidden basements, the dirt lickers convene to regurgitate the soil they ate, molding them into massive and slow-spinning potter's wheels, into spit-bound earth elementals that serve their obscure occult purposes. Duties and activities: surreptitiously sampling strange soil, haggling with gardeners about compost, practicing elemental control glyphs by tracing them in the air. Might ask adventurers to search out new dirt, take down rogue elementals, find an ancient tasting guide. Symbol: a dirt-flecked tongue.
Disgusting, but also inspiring.
Yes.
I've sent people
that.
to the desert to get 3 different colors of sand with those folks, as well as across plains to harvest the soil for a special strain of coffee in collaboration with and opposition to the Brewers Guild. And so just absolutely tremendous. Also, congratulations, Keegan, for that tier 1 subscription.
Yeah. Crushing it. As always.
I
as
want to know that. I want to see the text to this ancient tasting guide.
Ooh.
I mean,
Like,
you have to play to find out.
The crunchiness of the sand. Do we go into like grit?
Oh,
Well, I'll tell
I
you
don't-
what. Why don't you tell me in classic Teambrewing
Ooh.
fashion, one of the things that one of the notes that is listed in this ancient tasting guide. Like, tell me a little bit about the grit.
Okay, so beach sand along the East Coast has a little bit of spiciness to it. It's from all the salt content, but there's so much mixed in with the sand that every time you taste it, you get that sensation of a wipeout from boogie boarding, which is that salt up your nose and just the little crunch that kind of makes everything feel like.
Mhm.
Awesome. Sarah, how about you? What's one of the things that they find in this tasting guide?
Mine's also going to be sand based. If it's one of the best ways to like track something is with sand dune sand, because of the way that sand dunes work. They like slowly roll across like the desert and everything, so the sand gets moved from point A to point B really fast. And people who like specialize in sand dune sand tasting actually learn the ability to teleport because of like how quickly, and can like dune hop literally like from sand dune to sand dune.
So the reason that both of these two things are important is primarily that when you create a sedimentary rock out of these two distinctive types of sand, allowing them to be forced together with the spit of a dirt liquor, it allows the person who bears it once per day, if they are on a boogie board and about to wipe out, to teleport to safety on the beach. And
This
so,
is very good.
very, very important item to have down the dungeon.
The saving
Chad,
them the embarrassment of losing their swim trunks.
Yeah, Chad, if you have something you want to name in the dirt tasting guide, Harrison's already said sand is coarse and it gets everywhere. Classic pull. Feel free to drop that into the chat. We'll add it to the official anti-canon Team Brewed tasting guide for this episode.
I would also like to add a motif of just wipeout to this session of Murder and Coffee.
So +1 to any time we get to mention wipeout.
Yeah, very good. Very good. Oh, this is everything. And I like it a whole bunch. Since we're mock playing a table anyways, I mean, we've already touched on a lot of it, and you can already kind of naturally see how using like the team brewing and motifs and all of this stuff. But I want to talk about trust at tables, because a lot of the stuff that we've talked about, you can't have it if you don't have trust. Like the social the contract of And you touched on it, like when you're running a one shot and you're like, okay, the one shot is we're going to the wizard's tower, and the player being like, fuck you, I'm gonna go somewhere else because screw you and screw
I'm
this
gonna
game.
get drunk at this tavern and do nothing else. That's
Right.
what I'm doing with
Yeah,
my
and
day.
cool. And the thing that they do when they do that is just give me permission to be like, great, awesome. I already established that we have a few people standing in front of that. I guess you're just not one of them. We'll see you later, right? You're
Bye.
drinking at the tavern.
Mhm.
That's not what the camera's going to focus on at all during this time. But
Right.
like, I'm happy to flash back to you every 15 minutes and just check in on what you just ordered or
Mhm.
how hungover you
Tell
are the
me-
next morning. Or
Tell me
you
how
know,
those
like,
mozzarella sticks taste, bud.
God, it's so rubbery. You can
um,
tell they're made here just from frozen old, like they've had the box at the bottom of their freezer for a really long
Right.
time.
But like trusted tables, what's something that you found as a GM builds trust?
So there's a couple things. Trust largely equals less, hey, you haven't done anything in today's society, especially like you haven't done anything to it's no longer like you haven't done anything to violate trust. It's now oftentimes more like, I don't know if I can trust you when I'm sitting down with you for the first time. Like, I think we have a society that has moved us to a point of like explicitly wondering. And I say this largely potentially as somebody who is cis, white, and male, knowing that like when I enter into a space, I don't expect people to trust me because I have not done anything to earn that trust. And I look like and sound like and am connected to a lot of people who have violated trust for people in the past. And that's just a reality. So for me, distinctively, a lot of it's about time. Have I spent time with you? Has that time been meaningful? Have I proven myself consistently to be someone you can trust? And that happens in a lot of different ways, across a lot of different settings, and not trying to force ourselves into a position of trust. At a table, I think that happens the most pronouncedly the smaller the group is. So like when we started streaming on +1, which is where I spend most of my time developing like culture of play and play culture, is like I put out there, hey, we're looking for a diverse team. I'd love to have people on. Please let me know. And it was crickets, right? Like chirp, 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 because it's just another white guy coming into the space saying like, hey, like we're gonna start a stream. And that's fine. That's what it should be. Like I wanted to make a statement of we are here. We value and want different voices. We very early on established like the more of the things you are like me, essentially, the less likely it will be that you appear on stream if there's anybody else who is not one of those things wants to appear on stream. Like that we're going to prioritize diverse voices. And if that bothers you, this is not a good channel for you to be on. Go be on someone else's channel, go start your own channel. And that's been really great to just have a community where that's just kind of a central part, and just having that as a litmus test of, well, I don't think I should have to take a back seat to other people. Great, you do. This is not a good community for you, right? But I would also say like smaller tables, right? It's much easier to create intimacy and trust in a 2-player RPG than it is to create one in a 5-player RPG. So early on, we had a lot of like 5-player or 6-player streams. Very quickly, this is not a commentary on TPK because I know y'all got some big numbers there. Like the smaller the table, the more intimately we could experience play with each other, and the better time we could have. 5 is the max that I'll have on stream at this point in time. Even then, I've much more defaulted towards 4 and 3 players being a far more enjoyable number, especially if it's one of those people is somebody I've played with a lot already, or that the other 2 people have played with a lot, and I get to kind of step into and enjoy the culture of play that they've already formed with each other. You can draft a little bit on other people's experiences with each other also, as long as you're willing to honor and acknowledge that other people already have pre-established relationships, not be jealous of those relationships, and wait for the space to be invited in and kind of share that spotlight. So a lot, that's kind of stream culture, but a lot of that's what it looks like at table. Recently, I love Joe DeSimone. Joe DeSimone was like, actual plays are super cringy. I don't get it. And then a bunch of other people chimed in also. RPGs are cringy. The first session of any RPG that you sit down, especially to play with other people. So if you're doing a one shot, it's awkward and it's weird because you're all kind of figuring out what you're going to do. Unless you all play together regularly, you know each other's cues, you know how other people, if you know how to pass the spotlight, you know all the different things that you need to, and you can trust each other to do that, it's going to be a little weird. It's going to be a little awkward. It's like a first kiss where you are figuring out exactly how to do this with this person, even if you have kissed other people before, even if you're good at kissing. Like there, and I'm using like intimate language intentionally. There is a lot of that,
the vulnerability of it,
that type of vulnerability, like that you get it. And Keegan just said, if you think about it in chat, which is a weird thing that Keegan and I have developed from being in small games, but something we both do independently. And then when we play together, sometimes it's all that there is on a stream, is if you think about it. So there's a lot of those things that come into play, but the number one thing is taking time. The first table I sat at consistently, the narrative of that game had been going on for over 20 years across 3 different editions and across, at different points, 8 different tables. They had documented a wiki about those things. I didn't have to take any of it in, but it was there for me if I wanted to. I was stepping into a place where these giant webs of relationship had been spun over decades. And I'm like, I have 3D6 and this is my first time playing a role-playing game. And my first character came in a little hot, right? Like I didn't understand the style of play, and they were very gracious and very patient with me. No one ever said anything. I had a blast my first session, but I definitely, looking back, like came in and was like out of place in the setting that it was already existing and going on around side me, because there was no full way for me to embrace it. And they got that and they were patient with me. Over time, I made impact on that web of games that then, even as I left that table, impacted what happened for years after I left that table. Narrative beats that I got, because it was a co-GMing situation, and I got to run a few games, and choices that I made as a GM resonated through that, and player characters I introduced resonated through that for years to come. Stepping into those kind of things is very interesting, but like there is a level of just sitting down and figuring out, and no matter how good you are, like it's the reason why we kind of oftentimes are like, con games are weird. It's why safety tools and well-written introductions are so important.
Yeah.
It's why, you know, thinking about whether something's the right table for somebody or not is important, and why it's not okay to say if you're halfway through explaining a game and somebody goes, this is actually not the game for me, that's a bad thing. I remember the first game I ran at a con, somebody was like, oh, I've got to go check on something real quick, I'll be back. And as soon as they got up, I was like, they're not
coming back.
Like they very politely did not want to say, I'm not enjoying this game.
Right.
And that's fine. Like I was a new GM at that point in time. I didn't have a lot of experience, and it was just them and one other person, and I and that other person knew each other. And I don't think they knew how to integrate into the fact that we already kind of knew each other and how to pre-establish relationship. And I don't know that we were good enough about inviting them into that space. And so smaller groups really help with that, or groups that are partially really oriented, like have played with each other a lot, but maybe don't know, not everybody knows everybody. Like it's really great when it's like everyone knows someone, but no one knows everyone. Those are really great tables to come to, because everybody kind of has their buddy who they already have some trust with, and you can kind of lean on that a little bit early on. There's just some of my favorite streams. Even Sarah, like you coming into streams, like I'd watched you play for the first couple times. You had played with Keegan, I had played with Keegan had played with, you know, and so like it was really easy to, and you brought in like a couple other players who you had played with. It was really fun to basically be like, great, I'm stepping into a culture of play that these people have established, and I'm the GM, which gives me some level of control, but I'm able to lean on these pre-established relationships, and I'm comfortable engaging in them. So there's a lot of those types of things that come into play. But the last one I'll say is like genuinely caring about the people that you play with.
Oh my gosh, yes.
Like that's the biggest thing.
Yes.
GMs are not there for you to abuse. Players are not there for your convenience. We did secretly joke about calling this stream players, GMs, both human. What? Question mark. Because a lot of it is like, I want to know the people who I'm sitting down to play with genuinely care for me. And it's really weird. Like a lot of times in public spaces, like especially with stream stuff, like there's a lot of parasocial relationships, which is a reality. Just because a relationship is parasocial doesn't mean that I can't care about the humanity of the person who I'm engaging. Actually, if I care about the humanity of that person, any level of parasociality I have is probably going to be way healthier, because I can be like, okay, I'm not actually friends with this person, but they are a real person and they do have a life outside of this. Like, it's really like, so I don't like Critical Role, like, period. I have a hard time when people shit on Critical Role, but also so do I, period. The reason I do is because Laura Bailey and I were very good friends in high school. And so like, I 100% all the problematic things about Critical Role are problematic, and I am the first to line up and say that. When I see people shitting on individuals, like, one of those individuals is somebody who at one point in my life very much mattered to me. And so it's very hard for them to do that, even though Laura and I haven't talked in years.
Right.
Like, it's still very, very hard. And so, like, because I care about Laura as a human being, right? And again, that doesn't mean restrict any conversations about that. Like, I'm the first one to line up.
Right, for
This
sure.
means that, like, you can care about somebody's humanity remotely. And when you are concerned about someone's humanity, you start to be concerned about the things that they are concerned about. You start to consider certain things about what they need. And it leans into a lot of really important things around safety and care for the other person. Like, I don't care if we start a stream 5 to 10 minutes late. I don't care if you've had a bad day and you need to bounce out at the last second, that I want you to take care of you. I don't want you to take care of your obligation to me.
Right.
Like, it's okay.
Yeah. Well, no, and it's funny because what you're talking about has been top of mind for me, because I even recently tweeted about it, right? This talking about, like, particularly with streamed games, the like parasocial nature of, like, if you don't care about the human at your table, if it's about, well, I want my stream to look good, or this person will make my content more interesting because they're recognizable, or they're a good vibe. If you legitimately don't just care about the well-being of the person sitting at your table, and you're inviting them purely based on, they'll make my game look good or whatever, like, don't do that. Stop.
Right.
Stop. Like, it creates such a toxic culture for not only, like, that player, who will then 100% pick up on that and, like, feel that vibe and know, like, that person doesn't like me and yet I'm here. Like, that's weird. Like, they're gonna know. And it just, it makes it so much harder to interact, like, across the board. You know what I mean? Like, it's legitimately care for the people that you're inviting to your table.
Right. And it's like one of the reasons, like, so like we mentioned, we're a diversity first, like, channel as far as players go. That doesn't mean we don't end up with streams with just all cis white dudes on it, because there's a lot of us in the space, and it's based on people's schedules and interests. And so especially when we play OSR, heavy historical games, other stuff like that, that's historically, oftentimes, especially early on, who was interested in playing those games. That's fine. Like, people really wanted us early on to engage in, like, in weird forms of tokenism to prove ourselves. And I was just like, look, I don't ever want to look at somebody who is a diverse voice and be like, oh, I have to have you on stream. Like, because that's never what's going through my mind when I get to sit down and play with any one of our players. Like, if somebody's one of our players on stream, maybe not the first time, like, in all honesty, the first time I'm playing with them, I'm figuring out whether or not I'm excited to play with this person.
Right.
Post that, if they're still like, I'm excited to play with them. Like, period.
Yeah.
And nothing else goes into mind other than the way that we build our community to be diverse and inclusive and to represent a broad range of voices that can all gather around the good of games and exploring, like, our human realities within those things and telling great stories together. Great. I'm on board with that. Like, and there's weird nuances you can dive down to in any of those things, but I'd rather negotiate those in community with people than just reduce it to, like, here's the face I want on stream, right? And that's not, and that can't be a cop out for anything, but it also is something that we have to consistently think about as we approach these things. Because if we're actually just caring about the human in front of us, we should be seeing more diversity and more inclusiveness. It doesn't operate in opposition to that.
Correct.
And it's not toxic tokenism that takes place in those spaces either, because that's a weird dog whistle thing that gets thrown out. So, but yeah, just being there, right? And so months later, when I put out another call and, like, saying, hey, like, we're here, we're looking for diverse voices, like, the response was much stronger because we had spent 6 months saying, here's who we are, here's how we engage with the community, here's the reality of it. Like, and even to this day, like anytime I approach someone, like I'm like, here's who we are, here's what we do. If you're not interested, that's totally okay. I understand. We really want to honor and value your time, especially for minority and especially for marginalized voices. Like, because I don't ever want it to feel like we're trading on something here. But I would say that's true for all of our players, regardless of if they look exactly like me or look completely different from me, right? And so I just want them to know that we're excited to sit down and play great games with them in a space where everyone is comfortable. And that's such an important part of who we are and what we do. And it looks different a lot of times than even we think it do. One of the biggest things that's come up for me over the last few months, there's a weird amount of Americentrism in the way that we think about. I know this was not on our list of things to talk about.
No, this is great.
In the way that we think about these conversations, because America dominates the landscape around this, which means that we're a primarily white, primarily capitalist, primarily colonialist environment who lives in the global north. And has an immense amount of wealth, and we're lots of times dictating the way we have these conversations. When you sit down with people who are from Asia, far Eastern Europe, the global South, around some of these things, their perspectives are oftentimes very different than a lot of the things that we get riled up about. And we've had a couple of those things come up on streams as we talked about world building. We've had different panels, other things like that, but it's really interesting to dive into some of those different realities, and sometimes wanting to push back a little bit on, like, I know this seems like an American way of talking about this, but like I was out on a week-long event last week and it came up within the community that I was supporting, because there were like 3 members of the community who moved to the US from overseas and don't understand the rest of the way the community operates, because everybody else in the community is from the US or Canada and they operate in a very different mode. And so like there's tons of things that come into how we create a community that actually has space for everyone, especially when we're talking about streaming and remote table culture and other stuff like that. And so it's one of the reasons why like we handle safety tools at my table. We handle safety on my table in a number of really like varied ways. Starting with, I have players who, when they are signed up for a game, I will message them in the afternoon and be like, have you eaten? Have you drinking like water today? Did you get enough sleep last night? Right? Like in the middle of the day, because they were people who were showing up to the table constantly like exhausted and hungry because they had made a commitment. And I'm like, if we need to start 30 minutes late so you can go get something to eat, get something to drink, breathe, take a break, let's do that, because it's more important than us starting our make-believe elf game at 8 versus 8:30, right? Like, you matter more to me than that.
The tree spirits can wait.
Elves wait for no one, Tony.
So anyways, that's like the physical realities are something that we oftentimes don't think about. And I remember sitting down with like Bo, who was the person who created the script change safety mechanic, and talking to this initially, and they were like the first ones to be like, yeah, how many times do you have players who just haven't eaten that day, right? And like, if we were in person, they'd be like, eat. But it's also one of the reasons we've just been like, yeah, if you didn't eat before stream and you need, like, you'll see me on stream sometime, I'm just like, I'll like lean back and I'll be like microphone blocking me so no one has to watch me eat or get anything in my beard.
Yeah, the classic
Right. And I'll just,
I eat on stream all the time. Sorry, I'm eating because food's delicious and I'm hungry.
Right.
Yeah, because
but we just started telling
bodies.
people like,
you can eat too, and then it's like we're having a meal together.
And the people you see on screen exist outside of this space that you're seeing us in, and they have real lives, and that's normal and okay and healthy, and so do you, right? And just reminding people of that humanity, but starting those safety conversations with just like basic human care is way more about it. And like, I will have the weirdest conversations about people pushing back on safety tools, and those people, again, typically look like me and have a similar
it blows my mind that anyone would have adverse reactions to safety tools. blows my
You mentioned
mind.
litmus test, and honestly, like that's kind of a big one because I've always used like a consent checklist for different items. By Sarah, help me.
Oh gosh, I'm gonna be zero help to you in this moment.
Well, it's released by people, and I don't remember the name. But anyways, I've just kind of always used that, and it's like people who are like, why are we doing this? It's just a game. Like, I don't want to play with someone that's like not okay with exploring these topics. And it's like, oh, congratulations. Thank you so much for letting me know right up front that you and I are not going to be right together at a table. Please have a great day, but my table will not be one for you, my friend.
And especially people who even take a step back from that, like not like, I don't want to play with games where sexual assault is off limits. Weird. I'm done. But also, but some of them start with, if we have to use a safety tool checklist, like why? Like I don't want to play with you, and I'm like, okay, great. Like somebody who doesn't care about, but it's so weird to me. Because like this is a conversation with a very specific person who I don't know well, and who like then immediately started accusing me of weird things because they thought I was being hyperbolic. Because when I compared like safety toolkits and like session 0 stuff to like, hey, if you were working at a high risk job and they said, here are the safety rules, like, and here's standard practices and procedures for safety, no one's like, what? They're like, oh, like this is hyperbole. This is exactly what people who use these things do. And I'm like, so my statement is, it's like that in the sense of, I want to do my best job. I want to have the most fun I can have playing. I want to wring every bit of enjoyment out of this. And the reason safety standards and practices exist is not risk reduction. That is a part of it. The reason they exist is to protect those individuals, but it actually gives those individuals specific guidelines on where and how to operate for peak performance. To know I can go up to this line, but I can't go further to it. And I want to know where that line is because I want to play in that whole space. So as soon as we've said these things are off limits, but these things aren't, and here's a way to figure out if there's a problem, then you've given me everywhere I can go. And I don't ever have to stop, pause, think, wonder. I can push into those spaces and know I'm safe. Like, it's a better game. So Monty Cook Games, who you were talking about earlier, and then Gauntlet RPGs, I think has done a tremendous job. Jason Cordova is somebody I constantly learn from, both for GM technique, as well as the whole Gauntlet community for a lot of this stuff. The best experience we've ever had of safety tools on stream that people could go watch and explore. We did a 2-part session of The Between with Jason Cordova, Sean Smith, and Max Lander, and me. 4-person stream. So again, that perfect number for me. I've talked to Jason plenty of times, but never played with Jason. I get to listen to Jason constantly through all the content Gauntlet puts out, though. Great parasocial relationship there. But Sean runs for us a lot, and I get to play with Sean a lot. I love playing with Max. Our first game together on stream and ever was like a super intimate game exploring gender and masculinity, and it was like a Swedish player, me. I horribly can't remember who the 4th player was, and Max. It was Max and my first player. Max like, and like at the end we're like deconstructing and debriefing our experience, and like we were talking about our experiences of being like male teenagers and the horrible toxic realities that we did, and like Max was like, I wasn't a male. I was like a teenager. And so Max's first realities with that were when he was an adult and exploring those things. And I feel comfortable sharing this explicitly because it's also all on stream. You can go check it out. Blood Feud is the stream. Great conversation at the end, and hear it in Max's own words. But like the Max and I have had some incredibly intimate like conversations about the things that are most important to us in life, from the get-go around play. So we went through and we set our lines and veils on the check card in advance. I had some very specific things put in because my faith is very important to me. And so how that was going to be handled in a game, in essentially a Victorian horror game, was important. But we had this beautiful scene at a cathedral where my character, who engaged, like largely has demons that want to have sex with them, and that's where they get their powers from, and Max's character, who is ostensibly an immortal Dorian Gray type god character, are sitting as a perfect example of wretched humanity and disconnected divinity sitting next to each other in this Anglican cathedral and as players and as characters, being able to explore the significance of that and the guilt that what my character was experiencing, the discomfort that their character, like that comes out of having that space to operate in.
Yeah.
Yes.
And never wondering if we're stepping over this person's boundaries.
Right.
Yes.
And we didn't have to stop and discuss it at any point because we trust each other.
You knew.
And we had clarified in advance, here's where the lines are. And as long as we don't go past, and that I know I have advocacy to stop at any point in time.
Right.
I was able to push myself further in that game as a player, like in horror spaces and places I would normally be uncomfortable with, without discomfort or consideration for my preferences, because I trusted the other three people at that table.
Being able to push further, right? Like that's 100% resonates with my experience, because like using safety tools up front and knowing like where the limits are. So when I'm running a game and one of my players like looks at an NPC and makes the comment like, oh, they blush, or like, oh, I think I kind of like them, I don't have to like message them or stop the game to be like, do you want to flirt with that NPC? I can just go there. I can just do that. And then we are all having more fun because we can all like chime into it. Or when I'm a player in a game and I know that I've clearly stated my lines and my GM brings up like a heavy topic, like my character's spouse dying or whatever, and starts bringing up those things, I can really lean in and be in the narrative moment, like feeling the feelings. Like I love the like showing the significance of the theme of the moment, and I don't have to be like, I sure hope they don't bring up this one thing that is kind of adjacent to this. Like it's the map's been drawn. We know where the basketball court is outlined. We know exactly where we can go, and then we can just hit those 3-pointers all day long. Brought it back to sports.
I don't understand anything you're saying.
Great. It's great. And
I mean, I was worried you were gonna wipe out there, but you just rode that.
There it is, bud. There it is, bud.
God.
Oh, so good. So good. But it's just I find when people are upset by things that make it so everyone can be safe and play, to me, like I make the assumption they just don't understand. They don't understand what it actually is. Like they hear words and they go, I don't like that, and they just like they don't actually understand what's being accomplished with it. And if they actually engaged with it, they'd see this only benefits everybody. Legitimately. It's only a boon. But I think a lot of the times people aren't open to having the conversation because they hear certain words in certain orders, like, and they go, no.
The weirdest take I ever had, and it was in that same conversation that I mentioned earlier. And again, I'm not shouting this person out because I don't want to dig on them. If you're watching this later, like I did not enjoy that conversation. I still would love to connect with you on a human level and explore this concept in play with you, because I think that's the best place to suss any of this thing out. That the individual that was like, oh, like, you guys are always so hyperbolic about these things. Like in their mind, it was just we're just trying to scan for jackasses and block jackasses from play. As long as you're not playing with jackasses, that shouldn't matter. But like, if you're not a jackass, why are you objecting to this? 1, 2, that's a power trip. That's turning safety tools into a weird gatekeeping power move that runs contrary to the intent of what toolkits are all about for play. It's not about gatekeeping.
It's literally the opposite. It's the opposite. It's making sure everyone can be there.
Right.
Yes.
And if that's all you're using toolkits for, absolutely pass. If you're just using them to block people from playing, that's bullshit. If you're learning to figure out if this table is good for you or how we can experience play in the most fulfilling way possible. Because here's the thing. You might sit down and be like, what are our lines and veils? Nothing. Cool. Awesome that we've all lived lives of privilege and don't have emotional scars that are going to get triggered.
Yeah.
Let's go. Right. Like that's, how much time have you wasted at that point in time? Or, well, we're just playing a tactical, like 4E style game. We're not going to get heavy into RP. I don't like when eyeballs explode. Go. Like, it doesn't matter, right? Like,
literally,
those things are fine.
Yeah. Yeah, it's just
It's like a second out of your life, and
a second
you're
out
good
of
to
your
go.
that like only makes everything better. It only enhances the experience. It's the weirdest thing. Like why don't you want to have a good time though? Like
Right.
Yeah.
that it's just it is baffling.
But more
Why don't you
importantly,
wanna have a
why
good
are
time?
you okay with other people potentially having a bad time?
Right.
Right. Care about the other people. Like it really okay, great.
It's almost like they're other humans at the table.
You're the most
Oh my God.
you're the most resilient, hardcore, nothing bothers you one. Great.
Great.
Cool. Very, very neat. But also, you're going to be playing with other people. Why don't you care about them enough to know that what would be damaging to them, you know? And like, oh, this person's not cool with torture, so they can't be in our very cool game.
Right.
That sucks.
And most people just have a veil on torture. Like I have very few people who are like, torture is a line. Like if torture is going to happen off screen, we do what it takes to get this person to give us the information. Great, you've done that. Right. Here's what they told you. Let's move forward. We don't need to know about all the horrible things that you're doing to them. Like that's usually like, and not people should throw it up as a line if it's a line for them. But most people I know just don't want to talk through it because very few of us want to engage in the mentality it takes to torture another person. And so it's one of those things. But there are certain games I played. Like I played the Slow Knife with Jack from Mousehole Press. It just finished up on Kickstarter a little while ago, and it's a GM-less game overall. And one of the coolest parts about it was like we were playing horrible people who ostensibly would be the type of people who might torture somebody. So having that named explicitly was a good thing to name because there might be narrative beats because we are intentionally playing despicable people in a Count of Monte Cristo revenge narrative where the hero is slowly working their way back towards us and we're just the bad guys amassing power. We're the type of people who would torture people, right? And so like figuring out how we might comfortably engage in that is actually an important narrative beat, even if it's something that we don't personally like or want to explore together narratively. Like there's a lot of times these things might come up and figuring that out. And it's really funny because at the end of the day, also like the critique of this is why can't we just talk to each other like people? And the answer is actually that's it. That is it. Like you are correct. Everyone who's ever thrown that critique up around safety tools, why can't we just talk to each other like people? The answer is, I don't know, but we've proven over and over again that we don't know how to. And I could name both systems of privilege. I could name lack of tools. I could name not having the emotional resilience that you need to know to how to advocate for yourself. I could name the reality.
The answer is because you're asking that question rather than just filling out the form.
Right. But I could also say, like, on stream, it takes more. Like, if I'm playing with people I've never played with before, it's harder for me to trigger a safety tool than if I played with people who I've played with regularly because I don't have the same type of trust with them. I don't always know if I need to hit that trigger because I don't know if they're going to stop or not, or when they're going to stop, and then it could be too late. On stream, there's an audience watching. Do I want to be the person who stops the stream and makes us have a conversation about this thing? Do I want to name the sensitivity I have in this area vulnerably in front of a viewing audience?
Or put other people on the spot having to feel that level of uncomfortable with an audience watching. Yeah, if you're asking why can't we just talk to each other like people rather than fill out a form, it's like you are why. You asking that question is why, because you can't even treat other people and their potential line and fails like humans with these needs.
But
you're literally putting your need to not fill out a form for 2 seconds before their safety.
Yeah, but I will say in 2-player games, like with Gian Shim recently, with Caesar Capacle, both with very vulnerable, very intensive, very thematically rich games, our safety tool literally, I mean, we did lines and veils real quick, but our safety tool was literally, let's just continually be in conversation with one another. But those were 2 people who I knew their game was written that way, that was written into the game. And it's a 2-player game, so it's just the 2 of us. And they're people who I trusted to have the emotional, like I knew I had the emotional capacity, and there were people I trusted to have that emotional capacity. And that is fine. It is fine to say our safety tool is that we talk to each other like human beings. If you have developed a culture of play at your table where that is normative, and that is real. Otherwise, having tools and systems that help everybody at the table clearly know how they communicate those things without violating trust or disrupting the game is 100% a necessity and a good thing to have until we reach the point where yes, we can just all talk to each other
Yes.
like human beings.
Yeah,
Yes.
there are a few GMs or other players where I will, you know what, normally I would, but I am green across the board on all topics because I know you are setting the table. So I am fine sitting at this table with whatever you set. Like I will fill out the form obviously and look at others, but like with Sarah as GM and like a few others,
Because we played
like,
literal years, like
Right.
literally years,
and it's like,
spanning
and I
multiple
know
topics.
the things that I would be uncomfortable participating in at a table, I know
Mhm.
you would never make a narrative necessity.
But and also like there's something just like normalizing, like you talked about it earlier, Tony. You're like, hey, these are the beats that I want to hit. Just saying,
Yeah.
hey, by the way, here's some themes that are going to be in this session. We're all green here, but just a heads up, because like that's the thing for me, particularly with safety tools, is like even checklists are a point in time. People are dynamic; those things will
Yep.
change. So
Right.
making sure that you're touching base and saying, hey, like you marked green on eyeballs exploding, but like that was before you watched that one movie that just totally wigged you out. Like,
Right.
by the way, there's going to be some eyeballs exploding. So then you can raise your hand and be like, actually, like, not cool for me anymore. And then having that not be a big deal. Like being just completely fine with the fact that like we're humans. Triggers change. They
Chrissy just made
evolve.
me check my Discord.
Yeah,
Why did you say? Oh, okay. We're not in a game.
Yeah, but like it just it doesn't. Yes, and drop the die is making the point that exactly that I was going to is like stop making a big deal about like what those red lights are. Like here's my red lights. Okay, that's it. It doesn't have to be like serious. Like it just okay. Like here's the list.
Yeah.
Okay, done.
Yep.
Period. And
That's why I always say just get up and walk away from your, if we're playing a game and we come across something that like, oh, I was greenlisted, suddenly
Yes.
I'm not okay. Please get up and walk away, because like Chrissy just pointed out, sometimes I haven't checked my Discord yet and I don't know if you're, or like I'm not looking at your window because I'm doing a million things and I don't know if you're holding up some red object. Just get up and walk away, and eventually I'll be like, why haven't they? Oh, let's go to break and we'll talk about this. And they're like, this became a thing for me. And it's like, oh, no problem. We'll redirect. We're going to go a different direction when we come back from break. Are we good? Do we need a moment? And it's just a simple, yeah, let's just go a different direction. It's the easiest thing to do.
the
And that's
most
why, like
easy.
in the RPG toolkits, like the red, yellow, green, like people have started adding white as a white means I do need to stop, pause, move away, step away. I need time to process what just happened. And it's a good, I mean, you can use whatever language you want for it also too. It's also why just regular breaks are good.
So
like,
good. Good breaks.
like giving people space and time to take in everything that just happened, because there also is just like, even if everything's great and wonderful and you're having a good time, it takes a toll to be on for play a lot, and then people are like, well, half of my players are distracted during this time and other half are distracted during this time, and this person's always like, give people breaks while you're playing, especially after really intensive moments. Just say, it feels like a good time for us to just get up, move around, and stretch, take everything in, process a little bit, get caught up mentally, and then we can come back into play. That's a good thing to do at a table. It's not just a good stream technique.
Yes.
Like taking those consistent breaks so that somebody doesn't feel like it's a movie and I've got to run to the bathroom real quick so I can
Just
get
go.
back, like, so I can catch everything. Like, just pause the game and let everybody take a bathroom break, walk outside, smoke a cigarette, refill drinks, do all the things that they need to do, and then come back in. Like, that's a normal, good thing to have happen, especially in emotionally intensive games, but in any game.
Yeah. Well, listen,
We're so good at this, y'all.
I know. I freaking love this conversation, and
Let's talk all day.
I want to talk all day, but we have reached kind of the end of our time. Before we go, though, there's a couple of things, Tony, I would love for you to highlight. Number one, I want you to talk a little bit about the Together We Go jam that you've got going on.
So Together We Jam. If you like a lot of these conversations, if you're like, what's a space where team brewing and considerate play could be explored more fully? So Together We Go is the name of the core system for Down We Go, Through the Void, and DungeonDelvers.tv. Two of those games, at least, I think, have been on. Two of those games have been on TPK Roleplay. You can watch them a lot over on our channel, plusoneexp. But they're like our house OSR system. OSR systems, old school Renaissance, get a lot of baggage for like being hallmarks of like inconsiderate play, highly granular, highly mechanical. But Down We Go and the Together We Go system is actually a system that is incredibly unitive. Like the reason we chose Together We Go as a name for it, because it was the original author coming together with a number of other voices from around the globe to say, here's a beautiful incarnation of OSR, or Sword Dream, as a lot of people might call it, because it's a different enough thing, to want to say, hey, like things like going down into a dungeon, those are classic role-playing things, but how do we take them and make them something that feels fresh, that feels simple, and that allows really cool narrative to emerge at the table in exactly a lot of the way that we've been talking about. So it's a very simple modular system that we created. Almost all the procedures and a lot of the core rules for the games fit on one piece of paper. And there's a jam going over right now at ttrpg.link/TWJam, or if you go to itch and try to search for it, Together We Jam. But you can make supplementary content for any of those 3 core games, but a lot of people have focused on making totally original content. Aaron King has After the Bomb, which is a Fallout lifted at the moment style RPG, where you're experiencing societies emerging in the waste as a group wandering around between them, and you get to name a lot of how some of these societies work. Together We Hunt is a primal, Stone Age inspired one, about tribes of cavemen dealing with the harsh realities around them. Somebody did a nautical supplement. There's been a lot of really just cool stuff that's coming out. One person who's researching their doctorate in psychology, they have a 2-page version of the game, and the dungeon is beneath this city, and it represents the things that you're struggling with in your life, and going down in the dungeon to defeat and overcome those things with a hopeful response, receive a seed and come back and plant it in the green garden of the city and watch that thing sprout into hope as a new business or other thing like that. But you're defining all those things narratively with the other players around the simple conceit of like, we're going into a dungeon, we're exploring a spaceship, we're doing all the normal RPG stuff, but being able to explore these very cool narrative spaces. So that jam is going on right now. We just extended it for another 2 weeks, so it's going through the 15th. We already have like 13 to 15 supplements. Charlie Ferguson Navy just dropped an art pack that people can use in their games if they want to. A lot of really cool stuff coming there. But Down We Go was such a great process to be the developer on, because Marcus created a really elegant core system. But my favorite part really was going to people from different parts of the indie, story game, OSR design scene, and saying like, we'd love you to contribute your voice to this project and help us define an integral part of what this game is going to look like. And the dozens of people who got to speak into the reality of this very simple to play game makes it, I think, a pretty beautiful encapsulation right now of what most designers are thinking about within this, not within RPGs generally, but within this specific space within the RPG scene. And I've loved being able to codify that, take it and hand it over to the community to be able to play around with. And I'm just constantly blown away by the very cool stuff that comes out of it. And so please go over to itch and check that out. There's a lot of cool games there. A lot of them are pay what you want or free or like a couple of bucks. And so please go support those creators. I mean, you know, you can go to get Down We Go and Through the Void also too. That helps support us. That's great too.
No, 100%. Please go do that, because these are the kinds of projects that, like, again, are so great, because it is these the more that I learn about like these different writers and these different systems, just it's all very good and it will make your table better. So go check out all those things. Tony, where can people find you? What's the best way?
Oh,
I can't post links. I've always had the ability to post links on TPK. Ownership of TPK changes, and all of a sudden I can't post links.
You showed up. First thing you said is now we're nemesis. So I mean, you did this to yourself, Tony.
Nemesis and lovers. That's the PPK +1 relationship. And I've always had the ability to post links because Mads needs me to be able to do it because
well,
you know,
yes, correct.
I'm good at it.
Yes.
Is my sub
exposed. Exposed.
Showing up
Shots
with the
fired.
truth.
Shots fired.
Solid call out. I'll fix that in just 1 second.
Amazing.
I don't know why I'm not now. Everybody should be subbed to TPK Roleplay. I'll tell you what, you sub to TPK Roleplay, you hop over, go sub to +1 EXP, you get 2 for the price of 2. Or if you use your Prime subscription on one, you get 2 for the price of 1.
If you donate $10 to our Patreon, you can find out how to get the 2 for 1. But you'll have to find the link to that Patreon first.
Cole just gave me a gift sub.
God bless. God bless Cole.
No, but it is a very cool space, and I love kind of helping reclaim the OSR or that space of kind of classic design from weirdos who just don't want to do any of the things that we just spent 2 hours talking about.
We want to make sure that everybody's included and everyone can like play games, because ultimately that's the thing that we're here to do. Play games. So let's do that. Awesome. Anything else we can plug? The Twitter is the handle that you guys have seen.
Across most social media platforms, unless it ends in ch, and then if you go to itch or Twitch, it's Tony +1.
There you go.
Why? Because it was taken for one of them, and I don't know why for the other one. But Through the Void is the project that I'm most passionate about working on right now. It is our space version of it. There is a interview dropping tomorrow that I did with Mark Shepard about all of my weird thoughts on sci-fi and how a lot of this stuff gets worked into that game. I am tremendously excited to incorporate a new piece of narrative tech that Jason Cordova showcases in The Between into Through the Void. It's called the Unseen in that, but in The Between, I don't know what we're going to call it in Through the Void, but it helps a big space like a city, like the City of London, or a space station like the space station in Through the Void, feel like a lived-in spaces by narrating scenes for NPCs that you will never touch or encounter with. In Through the Void, it happens every time you leave or come back to the station. You narrate half of a scene as you depart, and then you narrate what's happened in that same scene while you've been gone when you come back. But it showcases what's happening in the station in distinct ways, but it's entirely a team brewed process. And so I'm working on that tech right now, and I'm very, very excited about some of the cool stuff that's coming out. And if any of these things were interesting to you, Through the Void is definitely the best thing I will have made that highlights a lot of what I love about GMing and how to GM. Because that's all I think GM sections should be for the most part, is here's how to GM better.
I love that. Tony, again, huge thank you. I'm 100% going to want to invite you back because there's so many things I want to pick your brain on.
We need to talk more. Yes.
We need more. We need more.
Part 2, part 3, part 4. Yes. Let's keep it going.
A bajillion.
We need more TPK +1 collabs, period.
100%.
Yes.
100%.
Best frenemies for sure.
Luka, talk to the folks in the chat. Who are you? Where can they find you?
Oh no, this is the thing that I talked about.
Yeah.
I didn't know anymore how to say this. Hi, I'm Luka, and as of recently, I am now the owner of TPK Roleplay. Come hang out with us, play games with us, do all the things. We'd love to have you. Especially if you're in line with all the things that we talked about here today, for sure.
This is the place for you.
Yes. You can find me all over though, because I also just like playing games and running them. So if you go to our website and go to see our schedule on there, you will see all sorts of stuff. Or if you click on the About Us, you can see all our game masters, and it will list the schedule right there in a big shiny pink button to see who's coming up in what. But also, if you're interested in joining us, there's also under the About Us a little join us link, so go check that out. And that's where you can find me. I'm Luka literally everywhere. Twitter, everywhere I'm Luka.
Every single place.
That's me.
I'm Sarah Franco. If you like my face and the words I say sometimes, you can find me Twitch, Twitter, TikTok, all the places at Sarah Franco. Keep an eye on my Twitter, because that's where I tell you the things that I am doing. What are
you doing Monday night?
I'm gonna be over on a really great channel. I don't know if any of you guys have heard of it, but I'm going to be there playing the last episode of Solar Side, an extremist campaign run by the incredible Keegan EXE, where we are a group of necromancers trying to murder the sun, which is just the best sentence ever.
Yes.
So it's the finale. Tony's finally going to learn what's written on my sword. gonna finally.
We're all gonna learn. I think. at
We're
the same
all gonna
time.
learn. I can't wait. I've been waiting to drop it. I'm so stoked. So come check that out. But until the next time we see you all, I just want to remind you to enjoy your piping hot coffee.
And your cold-blooded murders.
We'll catch you later, guys.